When it comes to childcare in this country, it is a postcode lottery. With years of underfunding, finding affordable and available nursery places is a real struggle for most parents. And with nurseries closing at a faster rate than new ones are opening, there doesn't seem to be much hope. So, what is the government planning to do? I'm Lucrezia Millarini, and this is what you need to know. Hello and welcome to today's episode of What You Need to Know, and I'm joined by ITV News Social Affairs Correspondent Sarah Corker. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today. Your new research into childcare reveals that it really does matter, doesn't it, where you live, in terms of what childcare provisions that you can access. What did you find out?
Yeah, that's right. Where you live really matters, not just when it comes to the availability of childcare, but also the affordability of it all. Now, this is a really extensive piece of research put together by the Mitchell Institute. They're an international think tank based at Victoria University in Australia, and they've looked really in depth at how government policy impacts on the childcare system and the experience of parents and children. And the Institute looked at what are called childcare deserts. Now, what that means is they're areas where there are 3 children or more for every available nursery place. So parts of the country, certainly in England, where there's great pressure on places and long waiting lists, parents struggling to get their kids in. And we're seeing increasingly parents actually registering their children before they've even been born, such as the clamour to get their first choice. And this research found that across the UK, it's estimated that 1.5 million nursery-aged children are living in a childcare desert, so a really huge number. And when you drill down into the figures even more, we see certain themes emerging. So in the most deprived parts of the country, that's where the problems are most pronounced, because what we're seeing in terms of the models that nurseries operate, they often open up in wealthier areas because they can charge higher fees and they can make more money. So essentially it's driven by cost, by economics almost, and this is widening inequalities. Have a listen to Peter Hurley. He's the author of this report from the Mitchell Institute.
So what we found, looking at somewhere like London, for instance, we found that there was more childcare available in the wealthier neighbourhoods, and these neighbourhoods also, on average, charge higher fees. So what this suggests is there's more childcare available where providers can charge higher fees, and it goes to this issue of what are the incentives in the system, and that's what providers are responding to.
And Sarah, childcare is devolved in the UK, so all nations operating slightly different systems. How does England compare to the other regions, and what did the research reveal?
Yeah, each nation, as you say, operates slightly differently, and that's certainly had a big impact on the availability of places. So I'll just talk you through the numbers. In England, 45%, so nearly half of all nursery-aged children are classified as living in the childcare deserts. In Northern Ireland, it's not much better, 37%. Slightly better picture in Wales, 27%. And in Scotland, the picture is much more favourable, and that's because they recently put into place a number of funding reforms. There's more universal provision to free childcare. So there, only 10% of children were living in childcare deserts. So a real difference, really, when you look at different nations in terms of the picture for parents and children.
A real difference, isn't it? How does it stack up globally as well? Where do we sit?
Well, Britain has some of the most expensive childcare in the world, and this study crucially looked at it from an international perspective. So they compared the system here with Scandinavian countries, so Norway, Sweden, for example, and also the Netherlands and France. And the UK came out worst, apart from France. They were slightly, the picture there, it's a bit of a different system. So France came out at the bottom, but then the UK was just ahead of that. And I think from a global perspective, the UK is still classed as one of the least family-friendly countries regarding childcare, so a kind of unenviable title there. And when you compare us to some of the Scandinavian countries, there's much more focus on kind of parental rights, better work-life balance, more generous maternity pay. And I think some of the conclusions really are that the UK and specifically England has a long way to go to make the system a bit more balanced when it comes to juggling work and childcare. So a lot of work to do there.
I mean, it is always a Scandinavian model, isn't it, that we hear about that is so different. It just seems to work so much better. I mean, you know, why is that?
Just as I said, really, in terms of, you know, there's almost a different culture there.
Yeah.
Parental right, you know, dads get a lot more time off compared to here, the better work balance, more generous maternity pay. And also it shows the impact that childcare policies have. So if you get access to, you know, more funded government places, if you get more time off when you're a new parent, if, you know, workplaces have nurseries on site, it just makes balancing going back into the workplace and being a new parent much easier. And so I think it certainly for the Scandinavian countries, it's almost a kind of a cultural thing where actually, you know, you want to spend time, everyone wants to spend time with their children, obviously, but I think it's bedded into the system there a bit more and it makes it easier. Whereas in the UK, the costs are just so high, the places perhaps aren't there. And parents I've spoken to, a lot of them have told me that, you know, they have to question really whether they can actually afford to go back to work because the sums just aren't adding up in many places.
Yeah, well, it's exactly that, isn't it, Sarah? And you met with one mum, Lindsay. Now, she's a mum of 4 daughters in Newcastle. What does she tell you about her experience?
Yes, a mum of 4, including 1-year-old triplets. So she's really got her hands full there. And we met her, they were so well behaved. We saw them in the nursery and, you know, they were loving their time there because I think that's one of the incentives, isn't it, to get your children into nursery early because, you know, they learn so much and their development really goes on leaps and bounds. But the issue again, finances, nursery fees for Lindsay are astronomical. £3,000 a month. I mean, it's more than her mortgage and housing costs combined. And she really felt that the system is set up at the moment in a way that it's quite damaging for women's careers. She feels that she's worked hard to get where she is. She wanted to go back to work, but financially, she said she'd actually be better off staying at home. Have a listen to her experience.
To go back to work part-time, which is what I've done, I don't make any money from that. In fact, we're left short every month and we depend on family and we are moving to a different area very soon in order to make some money, and it's just survival mode now in terms of finances for the next 2.5 years.
Yeah, Lindsay was keen to point out that she felt it was really good for her for mental health getting back into the workplace. It was something that she wanted to do. But as a family, they're having to make some really big sacrifices. You heard there she was saying, you know, they were going to have to move house because what they're trying to do is to reduce costs because they know until the children are at school, childcare is just going to eat up so much of their income, and they do get those free government funded hours for all 4 kids, but it just doesn't cover the cost. So some really impossible choices for the family, and you know, in many ways she said she was just counting down until when the kids go to school.
Yeah, really difficult choices there, as you say. Now, you also spoke to Debbie. Now, she manages a chain of nurseries across the northeast of England. What does she tell you from that perspective? Yeah,
that's right. So the context of all of this is that the government is expanding the number of funded hours that parents get. So from 2025, working parents will get 30 hours of free government funded childcare, and that's for kids 9 months and over, and that's being kind of phased in. That's been broadly welcome, parents really happy about that, but I think there's some serious question marks really about the implementation of it, because nurseries are saying they're already at capacity, they're struggling to meet demand at the moment, there are long waiting lists, their costs are rising, they've got recruitment problems, because I could go on and on and on. There's some real structural problems within the sector, and they say unless these are dealt with, there's no way that they'd be able to manage the rollout of those extra government hours. Have a listen to what Debbie had to say. She runs 5 nurseries across the northeast.
There's a large number of nurseries which are risk of closure, and the numbers have increased significantly since COVID. What seems to be happening is, unless you have economies of scale and you're larger, you are really struggling at the moment because of all that disparity of cost.
And the sector said that this is from years of underfunding, and that means at the moment that more nurseries are closing than are opening. So in terms of those places around the country, so for example the North East and the West Midlands, where there is greatest pressure on places, the picture is deteriorating, and that is really concerning for parents we have spoken to.
And you mentioned recruitment, Sarah. Why is there such a big problem there as well?
I think the number one issue when you speak to certainly people working within the sector is low pay, because they can earn a lot more by working in other sectors, doing jobs that have less responsibility and that are less stressful. So it's really difficult to recruit, and it's also difficult to retain. As part of our filming, we interviewed a lady called Amy. She was 22. She just finished a degree in psychology, and she was using her time in the nursery almost as a stepping stone towards a career in teaching. So the issue there was, she's not going to stay in that sector long term. And I think the issue is many people don't feel that the nursery sector is seen as a career. It's perhaps not respected, I suppose, in the same way as other parts of the educational system. So I think unless that changes, it's going to be really difficult to deal with the recruitment crisis within the sector, which has been a long-running issue. And the government has said they want to expand the sector, they want to create more places. But I think the big question is, where on earth are they going to find the workers needed to make their ambitious plan work?
Yeah, and also, where are they going to find the money? Because it seems to be something else that this new government, no doubt they'll say, they have inherited.
Yeah, that's right. And what the sector are saying is, we've got the budget coming up in a couple of weeks. They want extra money invested within this industry. But, this is a political choice for the government, isn't it? They recently gave train drivers a pay rise, doctors a pay rise. What are they going to do for the nursery sector? There are all, this is the broader context to all of this. And what people within early years say is, it is so important to invest in our children right at the start of their educational journey, because that has a massive impact on outcomes. So I think nursery managers will be, looking at the budget very closely to see what changes, what increases in funding there may be, because I think ultimately that is going to make the difference between whether they can provide the places, whether they can't, and whether they can increase the pay for nursery workers, which is what they say they need to keep staff and to make the career more attractive for people.
Yeah, and Sarah, finally, it's going to be about money ultimately, but as you were talking about right at the beginning, when we're comparing it to the Scandinavian model, it's perhaps going to require a kind of a bit of shift in culture and the significance and the importance that we place on this issue.
That's right, and the government have said they want to create 100,000 new places. They'll say they'll do that by opening more than 3,000 new nurseries in primary schools. That is the ambition. The Education Secretary has said that fixing early years is her number one priority. It's top of her to-do list. She hasn't been in the job long, but she's been very vocal about how important it is that children are given the best start. So there is this ambitious plan, but it's just how deliverable that is, and there are some really big question marks around that. The political will seems to be there, but it needs to be matched by the funding.
Yeah, an ambitious plan and a very big job, Sarah. Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening. So for more on this, head over to our website and please have a look back through our other quick briefings on a range of headline topics to find out what you need to know. Until the next time, thank you for listening.